Well, hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome to the 5th episode of The Hive, a podcast that promises to get you buzzing about challenging business stories and the future of humans in a world obsessed with artificial intelligence. I'm your host, PJ Sherman, founder and director of BlackBee Group and Skilled Up. BlackBee optimizes your LinkedIn and website to turn eyeballs into leads, and Skilled Up is a social enterprise that is leading the battle against the UK's skills gap crisis. Joining me today is Vie Portland, a confidence coach, motivational speaker, author of inclusive children's picture books and positive growth books for adults, and founder of a social enterprise. She has recently received the accolade of being named as one of Small Business Britain's Female Entrepreneur 100 Most Inspirational Women in the UK. And she lives near my birthplace, so apart from being two very smiley people, we have that in common too. Welcome, Vie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course. But first off, again, congratulations on that award.
Thank you.
Is testament to the amazing work that you're doing at the moment.
Thank you. It was a real surprise. What was hard, though, was that I found out back early December and we weren't allowed to say anything until the 8th of January. And it's really hard. It's good news. But no, it's fantastic. And we're going to the House of Lords on International Women's Day.
Oh, wow. Very
posh. As a celebration. I know.
Oh, that'd be nice.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
That's great. How did that award come about then?
So do you know Small Business Britain?
Yes.
So they, the Funtrepreneur, awards are part of Small Business Britain. And I get their emails and, they shared about the female businesses. So I signed up for the emails and things. And they've just launched in the last couple of weeks the Lilac Review, which is about disabled people in business. Yeah. So they're really doing a lot. Small Business Britain are doing a lot for small businesses. Anyone that is running a small business, I highly recommend that even if you do nothing but get their emails, they're always a great source of information.
Okay. And it's good that they champion the diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my purple and lilac as well today, so look at that.
Yeah.
And you're always very flowery. I can see it on your pictures.
Yeah,
nice and colourful.
I tend to be. Yeah, when I go into schools, the kids always call me the flower lady. I don't have a name. I'm either Miss or the flower lady. So that's fine. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's quite a cute moniker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what I want to talk about, Vie, is sort of what you do at the moment, and then we'll go into your background, because it is very interesting, and I feel it'd be really empowering for people as well to hear the challenges that you've overcome. But take us through what you actually do as a business now and the social enterprise side of it.
I say that I sort of have an umbrella, and under that umbrella, I do several different things to help people feel fabulous. So I love it when I go in to primary schools and I'll go, can you guess what my job is? I've got the best job. And they go, no, yes. I tell people they're brilliant. And they're like, that's not a job. I said, yes, it is. I made it. I do one-to-one coaching with girls and non-binary folk from 12 up, one-to-one coaching with women and trans women. I go into schools and guide groups, brownie scouts, youth groups to run workshops with children as young as 3.
Yep.
I write books. And as of yesterday, I found out yesterday that I passed a course and I'm now an official trainer. I'm qualified to be a trainer as well.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. That came through at 9:30 last night. I can't tell you the relief. So I'm going to now be able to, I will come up with a snappier title, I hope, but teach teachers to teach what I teach. So it's more, I would love to go into every school, but I can't. And not every school can afford me. So this way I can teach teaching staff to do some of what I do to teach the children. And they can then obviously do it year after year after year, whereas they might only be able to afford for me to go in once or to only meet half the children. So I'm very excited about that as well.
Oh, brilliant! So you're empowering again, really. Then that teaching element, and it's then trickling down to students, which is great. It's like that parable, isn't it? Or is it the saying? You can feed a man for a day, but teach him to fish and feed him for a lifetime.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, but part of the workshop, because we had to do this huge assessment and we had to deliver our training as well. And every
Mm.
tech issue that could possibly go wrong, including me being thrown out of my laptop, went wrong. Um, but thankfully, because I've been doing it so long, I could wing it. Uh, but the course will also include stuff. I focus on the fact that it's important that the teaching staff join in as well.
Yeah,
So they're also boosting their confidence as well as the students in their class, because there are other programs that you can download and learn from it. But teachers are already overworked. And
yeah,
if they feel rubbish and this course isn't aimed at them feeling good but teaching others, it's not going to be quite so effective. So I work on their confidence too to boost them up, because the majority of teachers and teaching staff are just incredible and
yeah.
doing a great job with very little. So if I can do something to help, then I will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very admirable, especially like you said in that profession, because
Mm,
we saw it with medical staff during the COVID years.
mm,
I won't mention that too much, but also
yeah,
teachers. It's lack of funding. They've had their
yep,
salaries frozen for so long, and the support has dropped. Yet they still come back day after day to
yep,
support the children, the future generations. So incredibly admirable. So I'm glad you're giving something back to them as
yeah,
well.
yeah. No, I think I do this exercise with kids from about year 5 up. Younger than that, they get a bit confused. And do you know when you do a caricature, normally it's sort of exaggerating all
Yeah.
of the bigger parts of your face or the noticeable parts. I do a kindness caricature. And I always say to the children, right, we're going to do it together. I'm going to show you how to do it, but we're going to do it for your teacher or for your LSA, learning support. And I go, what's your teacher like? And the teacher's all there, and they nearly always go like this. And they tell me afterwards, they all hate me. That I always thought they hated me. It was going to be horrible.
Yeah.
But without exception, everyone always goes, they're really kind. So
Oh,
we'd draw a heart for a head. And we've had things like she's really good at science. So we had test tube fingers and
love
things
that.
like that. And it's a lovely way of helping the children, young people see um, the importance of kindness and how that makes the teachers feel, but also looking at each other outside of this meat package that we walk in to see that there's far more to us.
Yeah.
And the teachers see that they are actually valued, but the young people and the children don't have the vocabulary to to say that, because you're not taught how to go, thank you very much, miss, you've done a great job today.
Yeah.
um, so it's a lovely exercise. I do enjoy doing it, and the children love that I am not a natural artist. So that also gives them reassurance that it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, but it's lovely.
It sounds it. Yeah, it sounds like a good cause. And
Mm,
we do often forget how we used to think when we were about 3 to 5 years old. So you got to
yeah,
get back into the mind of a child, don't you?
yeah,
Um, that's
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But I want to now touch on how you got into doing the work you're in now, and your background, V, because we've had a bit of a chit chat before we started the podcast. But of course, you've sent over some information as
Yep,
well. But just to sort of read out what you sent me, and then we can build on that. It
of
said you used to
course.
be embarrassed by who you were and how you looked. V was deeply unhappy and felt completely worthless. She didn't believe she had anything interesting to say, and didn't think people would listen if she did speak. And at school, your careers teacher would say that you'd be a good teacher, but you didn't believe you were clever enough, which
Hmm.
sort of touches on the topic that we spoke about before we started recording the podcast, which what I'm covering with Skilled Up and empowering
Mm,
younger people. But I'm happy to say that you're now very happy with who you are and what you do, as you should be, because it's
yep,
incredibly amazing. And you now know that people enjoy listening to you speak, and I'm glad because now you're on the
yep,
podcast,
yep.
and that you have been teaching in one way or another for several years now. So just let's rewind the clock and go back to the first part of what I mentioned there about being embarrassed by who you were and how you looked.
Um,
Take us through your history there.
yeah, I grew up in, let's say, dysfunctional family,
Okay.
and I didn't fit. Right from the very beginning, I didn't fit. I I don't know why. My theory is partly to do with my dad was severely dyslexic and didn't learn to read and write until he was in his 50s.
Yeah.
So I was forging his signature on checks. He asked me to when I was like 4 years old,
Yeah.
because he couldn't write them himself. And I learned to read and write really early. So I think there was a little bit of embarrassment on his part, and the way that he was brought up, he wasn't used to his emotions. And so it was easier to criticize me. And
Yeah.
my mum always did what he said. So she also criticized me. And the sort of extended family as well, I was the scapegoat. If anything went wrong, it was always my fault. I was frequently told how fat, ugly, and worthless I was. Um, I was either told I was too clever for my own good, or if I got a question wrong on a game, see, you're stupid, really. So there was
Yeah.
always an up and down thing of it. I was never right, whatever I did.
Yeah.
So I left home as soon as I could after college. I wanted to go to university, um, but my family wouldn't pay for it. Um, I'm I was the first person in the family to go to university at all,
Yeah.
and I went as a mature student. But women weren't meant to do that. I've my family's plan was for me to be married and have children by the time I'm 21. I'm a tad older than 21 now and still haven't done that. So, yeah, as far as they're concerned, I failed my purpose in life. So I left home. I worked as a nanny, and right from the very start, I was who I needed when I
Yeah.
was growing up that never got. Um, and then I did go to university, went back to nannying because my favourite family I worked for tempted me back with a lovely flat on Battersea Square. So, I couldn't resist that. Um, and went back to them. Then when I left them, went to an awful family, lost that job and came back to Southampton. And because I thought I've got no other choice but to move back in with my mum and her then husband. And it was meant to be temporary. Still here, sort of, out of Southampton mostly, but nearby.
Yeah.
Um, and being back around my family, and I went into a job where my boss was a bully because I'd been so downtrodden for so many years. Like I got that a lot because if you say you're a doormat, people will treat you like a doormat.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a breakdown. I had a mental health breakdown. I was born with a physical disability, but again, because my family didn't care, I didn't get diagnosed until I was 27.
Wow.
And that had caused a lot of problems as well in my body,
Yeah.
and caused other conditions. And so my mental health plummeted, my physical health had got worse. And so, yeah, I had a breakdown. And for a few years, I barely left my home, lost touch with a lot of people. Um, and then I got to the stage where my only choice was up or out.
Hmm.
And two things saved me. One was I just got a kitten, and I'd promised, I feel, if you take on an animal, you have to commit to it for its lifetime.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've got to be here till she's not here at least. Um, and the other thing was I said to my mum and my sisters that I was feeling really bad. And although I told them all separately, their response was all the same. And they went, and it was the best thing they ever did for me, because in that moment, I realized they were never going to love me. And
Yeah.
the only way I could survive was not having them in my life. So I cut them all out and started changing things. I don't recommend this as a general way to be, but I got to the point where, well, anything I do is not going to kill me now. So I've been there. I can only I can only try now.
Yeah.
Um, and I love musicals. I've always loved musicals. I've always loved the
Same.
50s clothes.
Oh yeah.
And I was watching Singing in the Rain one day, and the word burlesque flashed up.
Okay.
And I thought, I wonder if anyone still does that. And I looked it up, and there was a class nearby, and I signed up, and I went. And I've always loved dancing. But again, when I was a kid, I was told I was too fat and ugly to be seen. No one would want to see me wobbling across the stage. So I'd only done it in the privacy of my own bedroom.
Yeah.
But I went to this class, really enjoyed it. And then this woman in the class said, I want to put on a show. Will you help me organise it? I am a helper by nature. So I said, yes. And then she said, you'll have to perform. And I'm like, no. And at that point, I couldn't cope with people singing me happy birthday because that meant they had to look at me. And I didn't want anyone to feel that disgusted. You know, my paranoia was high.
Yeah.
And she eventually wore me down. And I had a backup plan. You know, I knew about flights and everything. And I was going to join a nunnery in the Himalayas. I'm not religious at all, so I think I'd been a bit bored. But I really thought it was going to go so badly that I'd have to leave the country. You know, not just the country, but this side of the world.
Yeah.
And I did it, and people loved it. And that once went to another time, and I went on to become an international performer.
There you go. Well done.
Yeah. And I was baffled for a long time because I was still like, why are people liking what I do?
Yeah.
And then people started asking me to teach them. You know, they would say, you don't look like an ordinary burlesque dancer. Will you teach me? And I'm like, well, actually, burlesque is wonderful in that it's generally very inclusive. But I started teaching them burlesque, and I found this clothing company that made reproduction 50s clothes, and I started wearing those and going to vintage dance nights and dancing, and people would go, you don't look like an ordinary dance teacher. Because, and you know, and generally it's because of my size, I'm a larger woman, but they're like, but can you teach me? So I started teaching that as well. And all along I was using stuff that I'd used with all of the children I'd worked with, using stuff that I'd learned from my degree, and I taught myself how to feel good about myself again. Well, for the first time. I introduced all of these things that I would do. You know, I would write down on post-it notes, lady smiled at me on a bus today, because
Yeah.
that meant that I was deserved to smile, you know. And although at first I was baffled as to why people would do this,
Yeah.
but I trained myself to start believing that that person believed it, even if I didn't. And then that went on to, well, obviously lots of people are saying I'm obviously brilliant. And it was using lots of tips like that, lots of changes to my mindset. And then the people that I was teaching noticed, and other people noticed, and they said, I want you to teach me to feel good like you've done with all of these other people, but I'm not dancing and I'm not taking my clothes off. So the coaching started, and through that, it became apparent that it wasn't just me whose self-esteem issues had started in childhood, that most people's had.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time it stemmed from a flippant comment that a lot of people would say is a joke. Key thing about a joke is both people have got to find it funny.
Yeah.
But comments like, oh, aren't you a chunky monkey? Or, oh, look at your wobbly knees, and things like that. And that meant that these people I was working with, that's who they were. You know, I cannot be anything else. I am a chunky monkey. And that's part of what I do as well, to sort of help people challenge the language we use. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought, well, wouldn't it be amazing if I got in at the beginning and stopped or helped children, gave children and young people the skill set to be able to say, well, no, I'm not just that, and this isn't the most important part of me. You
Yeah.
know, it's who I am, what I do that matters, and this is just my meat vehicle that I walk around in. You
Yeah.
know, and so that's when the CIC came up. So I still coach women, but the CIC is for when I do stuff in schools and groups with young people and things like that. That was a
Yeah.
very long answer to your question, wasn't it?
No, it's fascinating. I appreciate you saying that because coming from a similar background, I can appreciate how sometimes difficult it is to relay it, and there are so many parts to your history as well. It's not easy to do in 2-3 minutes, so I appreciate that, because I grew up quite a big child as well, but I was lucky in the fact that my mum was and still is like a super important anchor for me, and it's
Amazing.
always been my biggest supporter.
Yep.
But not in an unrealistic way, you know. She's always given me a bit of a dose of reality now and then, but the rest of the family, I was always the odd one out. I was the first one to go to university as well. I'd rather sit there reading books and writing stories than throwing a rugby ball around, etc. And that's not to say that that's not a great thing to do if you want to, but it's not who I was. So I was always a bit of the odd one out, and also put up with a lot of those comments. So I do empathise with that, V. And it's fascinating, your story there, because it's not, because with some people they've either had one crowning moment which made them go a certain direction, but it seemed to you, like, to borrow from Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events.
Great choice. Yep.
But made you into the person you are today. And it's just so inspirational that you chose to go down the positive route from all of that darkness. You kept a look at that light, you know, and now you do that for other people. While so many people do get lost and go down another way.
Yeah.
But
have you seen the musical Sweet Charity?
I haven't, no.
It's not one of my favourites, but at the end it comes up and it goes, and she lived hopefully ever after. And that's actually the byline of my book for adults. And that's the thing, the light was hope. You know, I had to hope that there was something more than what I'd seen. And it's still my favourite word. You know, it's so important.
It is.
But again, you know, the fact that you've overcome those things too, it is hard. You know, we're both talking about it as if, oh yeah, it was a Tuesday and I just did that. And it's not like that at all, is it? You know, it's hard work, and there's definitely, you know, 2 steps forward, 3 back, you know, and all of this sort of thing. But so I know when I coach people, I can say, I know it's hard. I've been there. I know this is really hard, but I also know that it's worth it.
100%.
And there's these memes that go around, isn't there, about everyone wants to be a butterfly, you know, change from a caterpillar to a butterfly. But even for a caterpillar, before it becomes a butterfly, it wraps itself up, it practically digests itself, it breaks everything in its body, and it goes through this brown, sticky, smelly mess before it emerges. And
sounds like most of my life up to my mid-20s.
That's it. We've got to do the same. But for a lot of people, that brown, sticky, smelly mess is like, oh no, can't do that. It's too hard. But it's worth it. It really is worth it. And I mean, what I do now, little me would have gone, well, you're lying, aren't you? You're being cruel, so that I feel disappointed that I'm never going to do that. But it's so worth it. It's hard work. It's really hard work to get to this point. But now I'm in it. It's, it's wonderful. And I get nominated for things, you know, like being an inspirational woman, and I got a scholarship to do the training course because of what I've done and things. And so although my story is not a happy one, it's because of that I'm really good at what I do, because I can understand, you know, it's not like I've grown up in a happy environment and always felt confident and I'm going to teach you how because I read it in a book. That's a very simplified version of it. I know people go through a lot of training, but, you know, I can tell you all the academic stuff, but for me, the most important thing is I can say, I've been there. And I know how hard it is to sometimes get up out of bed, and, you know, so, and I think that's what people like, you know, that they know that that's what I've done.
It's that authenticity. Those lived, learned experiences are key. you mentioned about the books as well. I'd love to sort of touch on those. Just take us through the books that you've written. So you mentioned you've got a children's one and an adult.
Yeah. The books came about. So, as I told you about the story, someone asked me to do burlesque. I said yes. Someone asked me to teach. I said yes. I'm not very good at saying no. And before the pandemic, literally a month before, someone said to me, a writing coach said to me, "Vie, you need to write a book to establish your expertise." And I went, "Yeah, all right then," which is really what I say to most things now. And I started writing that book. It's not the book I set out to write, but it's the book I needed to write. So it shares more of my story and how I overcame it, and also how tips for other people to overcome it.
Yeah.
But when I was writing it, I'd had a line in my head for years of working with children. You spend a lot of time on buses and train platforms because most kids love buses and trains.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I'd hear a child go, "Where are we going?" And an adult go, "Look, I've already told you," or "Shut up, I'm on the phone." And it just felt so sad. And that is not at all blaming the parents or the adults that they're with. Because when we're at primary school, we're told to be imaginative and think big. And then you get to secondary school and you're told to grow up and, be sensible.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't have the confidence to be imaginative, or they might just not have brains that are wired that way. And so I thought, in the same amount of time it takes to say, "Shut up, I'm on the phone, I've already told you where we're going," we could say we're going on a rainbow sea in a boat full of bubbles, and that was the line that was in my head all the time whenever I heard it. And I thought, I'm going to try and do something with this as well. And it's aimed at 3 to 7 year olds. It's a picture book for primary school or preschool, really. And it's got repetition on every other page, because I tell the children when I read it to them, that's because I like to share so that they can join in with me.
Yeah.
But really it's because repetition helps children learn to read and they recognize the words. And so the first one was all about going to these wonderful imaginative places, because children know they're not real. And I think that's a fear that children have. If I say, "Oh, we're going to fly to the moon for afternoon tea," that they think you're going to do it. But you don't need to do it. You need to sit in a cardboard box in your lounge and pretend that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was really important to me, as a person with disabilities, mine are hidden, but I knew that less than 4% of books across the whole spectrum of books have a main character with a disability. And so even though the entire population of India is equal to the amount of disabled people there are in the world, so we're a huge population.
Yeah.
And also that usually when disability was represented, it was nearly always someone in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
But 92% of us don't use a wheelchair. Only 8% of disabled people need to use a wheelchair. So that means that a lot of us have been told we're not disabled enough because we're not using a chair. Whereas in fact, most of us don't,
Yeah.
So the main character, I wanted her to have a visible difference, but I wasn't going to make it part of the story, because there are studies that show children won't make friends with someone who's different to them, whether that's size, shape, colour, disability or disfigurement. And so I wanted to create a book where the child had a disability, but it's not part of the story, so that all the readers, children and adults alike, would see that we all have far more in common than anything that makes us different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been wonderful to have children with disabilities feel represented, even though it's not their disability. But also good that children will then say, "Oh, there's someone in my school like that, and I've not talked to them before. I'm going to talk to them now." Because we're scared, aren't we? We're scared of what we don't know.
Yeah.
And, we don't see disabled people very often on telly or anything like that, living normal everyday lives. And it was important. And then that book people loved that. And then another one came out very soon after, because once my brain starts going, it's and
Yeah.
the next one, same characters, but this time I wanted to. I've worked with so many families who will say to me, I'm always telling her she's beautiful, yet she's just getting thinner and thinner and thinner. What can I do? And I said, well, have you tried telling her she's other things? And we are living in a culture that is so obsessed with how we look
Mm-hmm.
that people think that's all they are.
Yeah.
And it's important to remind people that there are other things, like you give great hugs, you're brilliant at making me smile, I love
Yeah.
how you listen to me, all these things. So in the second book, again, it's repetition every other page, and this one's where are we going? But in this book, they'll say that the parent says, you're the brave child you're the fun child, you're the kind child, to help people get used to focusing on that type of vocabulary
Yeah.
rather than, but you're so pretty or you're so strong. And if you look at pictures of kids, the boys will be in an active, dramatic type pose, and the girls will all be like this. And that's because that's what they see.
Yeah.
And, so I hope that my book goes a little way into helping people see that we are far more than that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting the outside to look good. I love a lovely frock and I've always got flowers in my hair. But I know that if I was sat here in a bin bag, I'd still be me.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. So the adult book got written. All 3 books came out in 1 year. And yeah, there's more that I've written. I've compiled a book of stories from people with my main disability, because I was at a conference, a members weekend for people with the disability, and I had 2 parents come up to me, and they both had toddlers, and they said, we can't find a definitive answer on the internet, but when's my child going to die? And they have the same strain as me. And so I told them, with the 70% of us that have my strain, we will live an ordinary length life, probably. But because the internet is full of doom and gloom quite often around medical conditions, they weren't getting that. So I wanted to create a compilation of stories from our community to show that, we're in pain every second of every day, and we have to think about everything that we do. But that doesn't mean we can't still be joyful and have wonderful things happen. And yes, that book did that. And I've been in compilations in other books, and I'm writing about 4, I think, on the go at the moment, depending on what mood I'm in when I'm feeling the mood to write. So it's just, again, something I was told. My English teacher told me I was good, but she was
Yeah.
just being nice. That's what I believed. And so I'm doing that as well. Something I thought that, because people like me aren't authors,
Yeah.
and that's also a wonderful thing, like with what you're doing with Skilled Up, is when I go into schools, I say, well, I didn't think I could be an author either. And to tell the children that they can be, and
Yeah.
that's what you're going to be doing with Skilled Up as well, isn't it? Is
Absolutely.
showing them that there's alternatives and that there is hope.
Yeah. I was just about to say that goes back to that really small 4-lettered word, but very powerful.
Yeah.
Hope. Hold on
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
to it.
There's the acronym, isn't there? Hold on, pain ends.
Yeah.
And I really like that as well.
Yeah, that is nice. That is inspirational. Oh, I'm all warm and fuzzy now, V.
I get quite passionate when I talk about my work. Can you tell?
Absolutely. Well, again, lived and learned.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Okay, well, I appreciate you giving us some more insight into your backstory and what you're currently up to and future plans. And I'm so excited actually about the future, because we could be working on something for Skilled Up Southampton as well.
That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so looking forward to that. Now, this next part of the podcast, just before we finish, it probably will be the shortest part of the podcast because I know your hesitation around it when we initially spoke. But just to get your insight on artificial intelligence and the impact it might have on your industry that you work in, or even with people who share your condition, how that might impact the future. So I'll just leave that really as an open final thought, really, V. So if I can get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have done the ChatGTP thing out of
Yeah.
curiosity, and people could find answers. They could, if you type in top 5 tips for confidence boosting, you'll come up
Yeah.
with a great list.
Mm-hmm.
So people could potentially learn using AI. I think that there are some jobs that will always need a person because there's accountability. But again, AI could possibly do that in the future as well and check in with you after a week and say, well, did you do point number 3? I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I think it has its place. I'm sad that a lot of people are using it to create art and write books and things like that. When you
Mm-hmm.
upload a book onto Amazon now, it now asks you how much of the content was created by AI.
Wow, it says a lot, that.
Yeah, and when you sort of think, when I used to think about AI as like a future thing, it was, oh, that would be to help with science and medicine and flying to the moon and all of this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do understand its importance in those things. I am very sad that it's being used to create art, whether that art be painting or pottery or writing or drawing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that's a shame, because the art is generally stolen from someone's actual artwork, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
so I think it has its place. I've like the confidence thing. I put it in and thought, oh, actually, that's a really good comment to write a blog about. So I'll write 1,000 words on this one sentence type
Sure.
thing. So it has great kick-off points, I
Yeah.
feel, for what I do. I think it is sad that it's taking away jobs in terms of the creative jobs. Well, actually, in terms of any job. Um, but I'm particularly saddened by the creativity that's not being used and valued in our
Yeah.
society. But then that's been happening for a long time with the amount of cuts in schools to do with creativity. So,
Yeah.
it's sadly the natural progression, but not the right one, I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. That's understandable. Definitely an interesting future ahead to
Mm,
see where it goes. And I'm particularly interested to see how many other countries adopt the EU's directives on it, to maintain ethics,
mm.
which should really protect creatives' works. Because
Oh, I
yeah,
hope
okay,
so.
machines can create things that on the surface look beautiful, but it's kind of going back to what you mentioned there. What's behind the surface? What's the story?
Yeah,
What history and experiences have gone into creating that, which a computer just doesn't have?
yeah, yeah. We have all of these can be wonderful social platforms, and we've forgotten how to connect.
Yeah,
And AI is taking us one step further away from that potential connections that we can have.
yeah,
I know there will be people that argue and say, oh, through AI, I met this person, same as you get people who meet others in the gaming industry, but they never actually meet in person. There
yeah,
is value in these relationships without doubt. But for the majority of us, we need people.
yeah.
Um,
We're
uh,
social creatures.
yeah, and I think we sort of lost a bit of that along the way, especially with the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that there are good points about it. I am a little fearful about what's coming in the future,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I can also see that there's good in it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that, V. So there you have it, the 5th episode of The Hive for season 1. I hope you found it fascinating and inspiring. If you did, please do subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching. Thanks again for joining me, V. It was amazing to listen to your story. Very inspirational. Have you got any final thoughts before we go?
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's really good. I've enjoyed it, and I've loved making the connections as well that we've both got. Isn't it
Same.
amazing?
It is.
That is one of the great things about this platform, isn't it? That
Yes.
even though there can be bad, we can also meet people we never would have met otherwise.
I know.
That's fabulous.
And we lived in the same part of the world.
Yeah.
And never knew each other.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. But yes, if anyone's interested, the books are available on all platforms. I would highly recommend people go to Hive or Waterstones or those sorts of places, but they are available on Amazon too. And yeah, if anyone wants to talk to me about anything, I'm generally the only V anywhere because I made the name up myself. So, I'm easily found. So yeah, do get in touch. And thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, goodbye.